Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman, Dr. Scott Bradley, with all kinds of news the networks refuse to use to bring to your attention. We've been talking about the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah, there's serious issues, right? There's a lot of risk, no doubt. But I just wonder how they can, if Iran's really decimated and we've won the war and we've shut down their Navy and they've shut down their missile fire capability, how on earth they can control and just lock down the Straits of Hormuz to that degree. They must have a lot more capabilities than we think they do, or that wouldn't be happening. They must be backed by somebody, Russia, China, somebody that's got greater technology, or it seems like it'll be fairly easy for us to protect our boats going through there. But no. And so gas prices going up and the world in turmoil. And so now President Trump, obviously, in the war against Russia, had basically locked everybody down and had sanctions on Russia and everything else. But now, because we're in a crisis, I guess, Trump, U.S. grants temporary license, allowing sale of Russian oil already at sea despite the ongoing sanctions. So what gives with that? Now we're literally funding and allowing the funding of Russia. Now, personally, I don't think that we should have had sanctions on Russia in the first place. I think we should stay out of it. But the problem is we're looked at as this hegemony kind of country that just thinks that we control everything, everywhere, all the time. And that, in my mind, is the biggest threat, the biggest risk here, Doctor.
Well, obviously, we're not supposed to be an empire kind of thing. I mean, the Brits did that for many years, and we fought against that. We said we ain't going to do that. I mean, you look at all what the founding fathers said, all this kind of stuff, and we have fallen right into that empire kind of mentality. But it's interesting to me. It goes beyond. I mean, yeah, maybe it's not beyond, but it's part of this whole discussion. Is how quickly and often the narrative flips, chameleon. I mean, we do one thing and then another. It's like nobody, who's in charge here? Doesn't anybody connect the dots? Okay, if we do this, then that, and then this. I mean, whether it's just getting, on the big picture, getting into this war at all, or some of these sanctions and how we drift and go, how we do our homeland security stuff. It's like everything's a moving target. When we went into the war, we got to have regime change. Well, that's not so much in that discussion anymore. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We can talk about that. But there's these shifting priorities that they drift 2 or 3 times a day sometimes. And honestly, it's kind of like, I try to keep track of what's going on in the world. It's kind of a weird, nerdy thing that I do. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of hard. It's kind of like you say, you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes, it'll change. Well, that's what happens with some of these big announcements.
Well, and the question becomes, is that intentional, or is it that they just jumped the gun in speaking? See, I believe what's happening around the world, and I'm not blaming any specific person for this. I believe it's many people. It's the movers and shakers in government. It's the media. They want everything they say to be duplicitous. In other words, we won the war. Hey, we're about to crank up the biggest strikes ever. Gas is going down. Gas is going up, to where it's almost like they want you not to be able to kind of rely on or count on or depend on anything. Jobs are up. No, jobs are down. The price of meat's going way down. Oh, the price of meat's never been higher. This kind of stuff where everything you hear about, which is the truth. I assume in most cases the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but it's interesting to me how everything seems to be challenged, right? And everything seems to be, reported by different people as opposites. Hey, immigration is way up, or, wait a minute. No, the border's locked down. Oh, we got 19 million people in here. How many people do they, have leave? And, we don't know anything really, it seems like, right?
It's kind of like, some of the old arguments they used to have. Well, I voted for the war before I voted against it. It's kind of like they want to see which soundbite they want to play against when they run for the next campaign. I mean, it's so bizarre to me. I mean, here we were 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. The Dow Jones has never been higher. It's the most magnificent turnaround in all of history, and we got to take all of the credit for that. We're about 4,000 points now, right now, as we speak, lower than we were when all of that was being touted. So the reality is sometimes they get exposed ultimately. So it's kind of like, well, oh, we never said that. It goes down the memory hole. It's kind of like George Orwell's 1984 played over again. Oh, no, what the reality really is, and it is right now, we're at 46.8 or something like that in the Dow. But the fact of the matter is, these things are very dynamic, and you don't hear them saying, wow, the Dow's fallen off 4,000 points since its high that we touted here a few days ago. No, you don't hear about that. Somebody has to come on the radio and say to you, do you know the Dow's down 4,000 points from the high? And people are going, wait a minute, how come I didn't hear this stuff? It's just bizarre to me how dynamic this is. A lot of moving parts, like we say. And I think that it's a mass of confusion, honestly. And I'm more inclined than you are, perhaps, to cast aspersions at some of the people that are adding to this confusion.
Well, and I believe a lot of those dispersions are there, and the reason that I don't drill into that hard is just because what happens is, if you make a point and then you drill into attacking somebody or pointing the finger at somebody, then what you get is just nothing but, hey, pointing fingers back and arguing about, and then pretty soon you're arguing about that you attacked a person, or you're arguing about this or that, and you're not even talking about the real issue at hand anymore. That's what happens a lot too. So Trump, for example, demands unconditional surrender. Okay, I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm just telling you, what's the chance of an unconditional surrender by Iran? Zero, Doctor.
Yeah.
The discussion is absurd.
It's closer to zero than my slim and none comments often are. This is a 92 million person country. It's a huge country, very dynamic in terms of its type of terrain, so different than Iraq, so different than Southeast Asia. Some of the people that are maybe stuck in some of those modes think, oh, we got this and that and the other going for us. We have challenges in Iran that we have never fought against before. It has been a massive and is a massive kind of problem. And you look at the maps that go on with all the talking heads that are, the big pundits that are beating the war drums and so excited about what we're doing. The Lindsey Grahams that are in the news media, okay? And it looks like they've just obliterated everything in Iran because there's a strike mark everywhere there is across there. But the fact, that we have people saying, oh, we need to turn Iran into all the sand there, turn it to glass with our nukes going off on them. The humanity, one thing I'm struck by, Sam, and maybe people just need to start thinking outside the war drums. But as I look at, we're in Utah, and I know the skyline of Salt Lake City very well. I know the mountain ranges that are close and how the skyline looks against those mountain ranges and everything. When I look at Tehran, I see Salt Lake City. It's remarkable, the similarities. And I think about as many times as I've driven through that valley, past Salt Lake City, and the hive of people that are there, the humanity that's involved in that, the vastness this is a big city, and it's not nearly as big as Tehran is, but the freeways and the people out doing their businesses and going to school and they're with their families and everything like that. These absolute, I keep having to chew my tongue to not be profane, idiots that are saying turn Tehran into a glassed over sandpit are absolutely, they would do that to Salt Lake City if they had a half a chance because somebody decided that they weren't on their side.
Well, there used to be an extermination order for the Mormons or the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I sure pray we don't get there again. But the real question is, are the costs of the Iran war sustainable? We're at $38 trillion in debt, and they said we spent billions in even the first opening salvo of this thing. So, I don't think we have the money for this. And Trump's going to end up going to Congress for more funding. Whether they'll give it to him or not, I don't know. My guess is they will, because they always do. And so, I don't know where this goes. But Trump won't even look at legislation, as far as I understand, for the spending on the war until after the SAFE Act is passed, or SAVE Act is passed. And so I don't know how that's going to all work out. Is Donald going to capitulate on the SAVE Act, or is he going to get that slam dunk so that he can talk about funding for the war? But I don't think the cost of the war is sustainable at all. Not only from a cost point of view, from a financial point of view, but I mean from a weapons point of view. I think we'll be depleted before we know it if we're not very careful. And from an American's toleration. Americans are getting sick of war and sick of politicians and insiders making all kinds of promises and then not keeping them. I don't think that the people's toleration for this will sustain it either. We'll talk about it.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Cybercrime is exploding. Take Sarah from Sweet Delights, whose world crumbled after having to close with not being able to bounce back. Small businesses are prime targets, but the right strategies can keep yours safe. Jay Hill, CEO of Network Providers, has co-authored The Cyber Playbook Simplifies Cybersecurity for Business Owners with Strategies to avoid costly breaches and fines. Build a strong cyber attack response. Secure your business with key protections. Cyber threats aren't slowing down, but you can stay ahead. Protect your business. Ensure its security for tomorrow. Get the Cyber Playbook today at networkprovidersinc.com/cyber-playbook or call 385-446-5500 now.
Sam brought up this thing about sustainability and all that kind of stuff for what's going on with this war. We know that the first few days of the war, is all the real stats we have, it was about $2 billion, as in Bravo, B, dollars per day. And I suspect, very strongly suspect, in fact, I would absolutely be shocked if that was not just the costs of the munitions. Now, that doesn't include the costs of deployments and fuel and troops and salaries and aircraft carriers and all that kind of stuff. It's basically the launches that have happened of Tomahawk missiles and stuff. And it doesn't take a long time to build up to a couple of $1 billion a day when you consider the fact that, well, $1 billion is 1,000 million. You got to keep that in mind. But if it's $2 billion a day and we're launching Tomahawk missiles at $2 or $3 million each, you can see how that would add up pretty much. All of these things are very finite. We have only so many, and you can only build them again so fast. And I think what's happened is everybody's punching themselves out. The rope-a-dope concept is happening. I don't know if any of you guys even remember Muhammad Ali and getting somebody on the ropes and then just letting them punch away until they had nothing left in their arms. Well, I think Israel largely has punched out when it comes to their Iron Dome. They've launched a vast majority of their defensive aerial missiles. We took most of the defensive aerial missiles out of our partners' hands and gave them to Israel, by the way, right after the war started. And so these guys, in Bahrain and wherever, they're left without an umbrella. And all of these things, by the way, Trump called in the military-industrial complex guys into a closed-door meeting the other day, and I think they gave him a kind of a come-to-Jesus moment when he says, "We got to have more production, got to have it now. It's got to be." Ramping that up is not a wave your magic wand kind of thing, and getting these munitions through the plants and having the resources
and the
to
cost
do that.
is through the roof, and the supply chain is through the roof. And I mean, there's a lot of problems with this, and I don't believe it's sustainable, because the question is, when we say, are the costs of the Iran war sustainable? What is the Iran war? Okay. Is it with Iran? I mean, if so, they're decimated. Trump already told you that. They're pretty much done. But is it against Russia? Is it, is it a Ukraine carryover? Is it with China? Cuba's next, President Trump says, how's that going to look? Is it Venezuela? Is it? And the question becomes, how many places in the world can we support whatever our position is? And I say whatever our position is because it isn't just about protecting people, is it? It's about oil and about energy and about a lot of different things, right? But is it sustainable? I don't know what war we're talking about when we say the Iran war, because is that a China war? What is that, Doctor? Do you know? I don't really know how to get my arms around what that means. There's so many. We're in over 130 nations militarily speaking, for example. We spend more money on war than any other country combined, and we're over $1 trillion per year in war now, right? And so I don't know what that looks like, or what, when we say the Iran war, where does one war end and the other war begin, or whatever? And how do we isolate out just the Iran war? What about the Ukraine situation? What about I can just keep going on, right?
You truly can. And people would say after that kind of, commentary, oh, don't you support the troops? Well, yeah, I do. If we don't commit our troops to harm's way, unless it's appropriate, it's just, and has been declared appropriately by our Congress, as the Constitution requires. I mean, all of those kind of things, I'm all for supporting the troops, but there would be a lot fewer troops in harm's way if we followed a constitutional form of government.
You're right about that. Then the question becomes, are we going to have conscription? Is that coming? Are we going to have boots on the ground? Those are questions that people need to really ask. And now, basically, we, bombed an Iranian girls' school. And some are then, Trump said, I think that the Iranians did it. And now others are saying, as they've researched it, that the United States accidentally did it. Their intel wasn't updated appropriately. Trump says, if that really is the case, I'll admit it, but it's still under investigation. I'm pretty confident that we, by mistake, hit a civilian target there. And I'm telling you right now, the world's stomach for war, and especially the American people's stomach for war, when they start to see that stuff happening, when they start to see civilian casualties, numbers crank up and things like that, they start to see that we're losing expensive aircraft and we're losing our own sons and daughters, and then we're killing innocent civilians places. I'm telling you right now, it can change on a dime, the people's tolerance for war, Doctor.
Well, let's just talk about this little girls' school that was bombed. It's a school that overlooks the Straits of Hormuz that we were just talking about. It's a girls' school. I think most of the girls were between about 6th grade and 12th grade that were killed. The minimum number is 168. There were teachers killed too. But here's the thing. This was purposely done. Nobody can say, oh my goodness, the Tomahawk missiles straight off. And of course, their first denial was, no, the Iranians did it themselves. No. We have film footage of Tomahawk missiles hitting the site. We're the only ones that are launching those, kids. We are the only ones that pulled the trigger on that.
And we're the only ones now, though, but once they get a few of these, they might be able to reverse engineer them and put our labels on them and everything else. It won't be long to where they'll have them too, Doctor.
They're not going to put our labels on them. But the fact of the matter is, yes, you're right. People do reverse engineering. That's what we did with some of the drones that they picked up over time.
Well, if they do put our labels on it, then you'll never know who done it, right?
This was a double tap. What does that mean? It means we purposely sent a missile in. It blew up. And then when the first responders and the parents and everybody showed up to try and pick up the pieces, we hit them again. This was purposely done. Now, now I will give...
In other words, a double tap is simply make sure you're dead. If you really want to do sniper stuff or if you want to shoot somebody, the double tap makes sure that someone's really dead, right?
Yeah, 2 shots to the head.
Yep.
Okay, so the first shot did horrific damage, but most of the kids survived. When the mom showed up to pick the kids up and get them off the site, they were hit again about 40 minutes later. Okay, so the targeting information, here's the best story they can tell, is that their information was old, but it's years old. Literally, that school has been there for years. It's next to an Iranian military base. It's a medical site, and so it's that most of the officers had their little girls in that school, and it's been a school for years. And so when they hit it and then hit it again, it was done on purpose. Now you might say, well, we had 15-year-old targeting information. It used to be, before this fiasco started, that they had multiple teams looking at every target and assessing whether it was a valid target or not. Is it a military target or is it a civilian? Is collateral damage going to happen with this thing? Whatever. And our rules of war says we're going to minimize collateral damage, all of these dead people that are around that weren't really the targets. But they have diminished, if not eliminated, these targeting teams that were a separate set of eyes looking at things and saying, I'm not so sure about this one. Or yeah, this one's a go for sure. Green light this baby. The fact of the matter is that it's completely, it's horrific what has been done. And it appears, I have looked at the images of Tomahawks coming in. You can actually see that they are Tomahawk missiles. And so this stuff that Trump's chewing his tongue on, and the first thing was, oh yeah, the Iranians had an errant missile that landed where it shouldn't have been, blah, blah, blah. They were probably shooting at the Straits of Hormuz or whatever, No, you can't say that. And that's where the propensity is to lie initially. And what they ought to do is keep their mouth shut and say, we are looking at this, and if there's information, we will provide it to you. But to immediately respond with something they got to retract. And the whole world can see it's got to be retracted.
Well, and what they believe, though, is they believe if they tell the lie first. Okay, the lie has legs, Doctor.
Yeah.
And so that stays in the minds of most people, and most people miss the backtrack. I don't know if you know that in the news, but that's really standard. That's why if they attack Sam Bushman in the news and then they retract it, the retraction doesn't help much. The damage is already done. The truth doesn't have legs to spread like the lie does. And so if Trump says, the Iranians did it, and then, half the people still believe the Iranians did it, even though we know the truth now. And that's kind of part of the problem, too. But that's why they do that, in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that I'll give you an example, totally unrelated to this war. But when Nature magazine published back in the Bill Clinton era, the fact that they said DNA proof that Thomas Jefferson fathered children with Sally Hemings, his slave, and then when some of us who pushed back very hard on that, and I had a lot of pushback from publications that called me a racist pig and everything else like that, when I said, no, that's not the story. You need the rest of the story. And then when Nature magazine got the real story about the DNA connection, they retracted the story. But the story today is every bit as much alive 30 years later that Thomas Jefferson fathered children with Sally Hemings. It's flat out untrue. But people didn't get the retraction.
And that's what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Quick pause. We've got a lot more to discuss. Can we sustain this war financially? That's one question. Are we going to have boots on the ground? That's kind of the other question people are wondering. Are we going to eventually have like a draft? What's going to go on with this? We'll talk about it in seconds. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live.
Proclaiming liberty across the land. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Greg Clugston in Washington. The military has just announced that all 6 crew members aboard a KC-135 refueling plane that crashed in Iraq are dead. Another aircraft was involved in the incident but landed safely. That brings to at least 13 the number of American deaths in the 2-week-old war. President Trump posted a new threat to Iran's leaders on his social media website early this morning, promising stepped-up military action. Meanwhile, Gulf countries neighboring Iran came under fire once again overnight.
In Oman, a drone crashed into an industrial area, killing 2 foreign nationals and injuring several others. The United Arab Emirates and Kuwait also responded to a barrage of missiles and drones. In central Dubai, debris from an intercepted projectile hit the facade of a building, a minor incident, authorities said. In Kuwait, drones hit the airport again, resulting in some damage. Qatar also intercepted an attack last night.
That report from the BBC's Barbara Plett-Usher. Pro-Iranian hackers are targeting sites in the Middle East and starting to stretch into the U.S. during the ongoing war.
Hackers supporting Iran claimed responsibility for a significant cyber attack against a U.S. medical device company. They've also tried to penetrate cameras in Middle Eastern countries to improve Iran's missile targeting and targeted data centers in the region. National security and cybersecurity experts say Iran's government will look to leverage its cyber capabilities against the military dominance of the United States. American ports, wastewater treatment plants, and power stations are among the most likely targets. Keith Peters, Washington.
Ukrainian President Zelensky says the U.S. 30-day waiver on Russian oil sanctions amid the Iran war is not the right decision and won't help bring a stop to Russia's invasion. More on these stories at townhall.com.
So my friends over at Pure Talk have been sending me customer feedback from consumeraffairs.com, where thousands of people rate and review the top wireless providers. Here, for instance, is a nice note from James in Raleigh, North Carolina, who writes, quote, after hearing Micro's ad, we made the switch to Pure Talk, and we couldn't be happier. We went from spending $1,200 a year with T-Mobile to $420 with Pure Talk. Thanks, Mike. Switch today! Exclamation point. Pure Talk is saving James $820 a year. And because he literally wrote the words switch today in capital letters with an exclamation point, I'm going to go ahead and dedicate this commercial to him. So folks, take it from James in Raleigh, North Carolina. Pure Talk can give you unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data for just $25 a month on the same 5G service the big guys are overcharging you for. Just dial pound 250, say Mike Rowe. You'll also save 50% off your first month. That's pound 250 to save an additional 50%. Thanks, James.
Abby Johnson was once director of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Bryan, Texas. After a moral crisis, she quit, and now she campaigns against what she once endorsed.
They implement abortion quotas in all of their clinics.
What do you mean quotas?
You have to perform a certain number of abortions every month. One of the reasons that I left...
Are they explicit about that?
Yes. It's in your budget, right there on the line item. One of the reasons I left Planned Parenthood was because in a budget meeting I was told to double that abortion quota. And for me, as someone who had spoken to the media and had said, you know, we're about reducing the number of abortions, we're about, you know, prevention, all of these other services, I was shocked to hear
since you actually worked at a Planned Parenthood, give us some sense of the relative number of abortions.
Okay, abortions, Planned Parenthood provides over 330,000 abortions a year. They are the largest single abortion provider in our country.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
Do you know what is great about America? Ask an Immigrant. Ask an Immigrant is a new podcast dedicated to helping Americans, especially our youth, value, appreciate, and be grateful for the freedoms we have here in America. Join host Lydia Wallace-Nuttall as she interviews immigrants from around the world to discover their inspiring personal stories about why they came to America. To learn more about why America is the most prosperous, greatest country in the world, download the Loving Liberty app or go to lovingliberty.net.
All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. So much to cover, so little time. So do you think we're going to have troops on the ground, Dr. Bradley? Do you think they're going to eventually be forced to have a draft? How bad, or whatever you want to call it, do you think this is going to get?
I pray that we will not put boots on the ground, but there's some real disturbing, and honestly, let me just say this about disturbing stuff. It might sound like we're madder than hops about everything that's going on over there, and I am. There's no getting around that. But had we followed the constitutionally approved protocol to do what we did, we probably wouldn't be there. And so everything we say about collateral damage with little girls getting killed in schools and aircraft running into each other and crashing and killing American troops and blah, 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 blah. If we had done this appropriately, it is unlikely it would be happening. And so the real beef is with the process that we didn't go through to get it done. Let's go to the boots on the ground thing. Now, that is a very complex issue. Carolyn Leavitt will not, in her public statements, eliminate the threat of American boots on the ground. She will not even eliminate the thought of a draft. Now, we talked at the beginning of the first hour about this is the 6th anniversary of the COVID con being implemented upon the United States with a national emergency, another travesty of stupidity. But the fact of the matter is, I was saying at the end of February, 6 years ago, that by the end of March, we would likely have a universal draft for men and women. That's how close.
And what's the timeline we think?
Well, that's the thing. It looked like it was going to get through Congress with the recommendations. Everybody green-lighted it. It looked like we were going to have a universal draft, men and women, no exceptions, unless you, if you only had one leg or something like that. Pregnancy didn't matter. If you had 5 kids as a woman. And the argument was basically going to be, and we don't need to get so distracted on that right now, but the argument was, is it 18 to 28 or is it 18 to 35? Okay, those were and I'm simplifying it a bit, and I know if anybody really did a real deep dive on it, you could say, well, there was some nuanced things. But
well, and you
basically,
can also say if we talk about the militia, since we're not supposed to have a standing army, we're supposed to be like, what, 16 to 45?
Well, basically, George Mason, who was, along with James Madison, was the principal author of the Second Amendment, said it was all of us except for a few elected officials. But the fact of the matter is that this was really in the mix 6 years ago, and I was gravely concerned. The one good thing that perhaps, maybe 2 or 3, I can think of 2 or 3 good things that came out of the COVID con, and we don't need to talk about that either. But this was one of them. It got put off at least 6 years.
Yeah.
So
what's your take? Are we going to have ground troops in Iran then? What do you think?
We already do. That's my position, is that we have forward observers. We have people, that are basically identifying targets and giving targeted information. I think we do have people there now.
Yeah, but they play fast and loose with the word troops on the ground. So you're saying, yes, they're on the ground doing scouting and planning and organizing and these kind of things. But I'm talking about frontline troop soldiers fighting. Are we going to see that, you think?
Well, here's the deal. There's a lot of different options. First of all, everybody's saying, oh, man, they're going to be a popular uprising and they're going to overthrow those turkeys that are in power and everything like that. Well, the Iranians don't have the Second Amendment. They're sitting ducks if they take rocks into the street. They don't have the capability of doing that. So here's what we did in Southeast Asia. And this was a long time ago, again. We sent in special operators, Green Berets, to train them, to win the hearts and minds of the people. We sent CIA people in. And if we're going to have a ground insurrection of Iranians, there's going to take some organization, some arming, some training, some funding, and all those kind of things. So we would probably have special operators of some flavor in there doing that. We may have it right now, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that we're also talking about Kurds. And that's really a problematic issue. The Kurds were instrumental in defeating ISIS, by the way, but Turkey was really bent out of shape about that. But the Russians were involved with the Kurds.
So Trump said that Barack Obama was the founder of ISIS and that Hillary was the co-founder of ISIS. And so what you're saying is that the Kurds defeated Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, right?
Well, we do this time after time after time after time. We have the best enemies money can buy because we arm them, we encourage them, we train them, and we send them forth to do it. And whether it's people that Osama bin Laden grew out of, or whether it's the ISIS group that came out of Syria, whatever it is, we did the encouragement of. By the way, there's an awful lot of truth to that these ISIS guys were trained to come in and overthrow Assad, who was there, which was the target that Israel wanted taken out of Syria, because he's a Shiite and Israel's expanding, and there's a long story behind that too. But the point of the matter is that there's talk about using Kurds coming in from the north. The Kurds are kind of an autonomous people that they don't have really a nation or anything, but they're in Turkey and they're in Iraq and they're in Iran. And they would come in from the north. They are not the Northern Alliance that we thought we were going to work with in Afghanistan in terms of helping, subdue that country. But there's a lot of moving parts. By the way, the Kurds are also, by and large, Sunni. Iran is Shiite. And so there's a religious war that we're fostering and everything there. And I know your question is probably more specific about, are we going to put 50,000 American soldiers on the ground as frontline soldiers? There will have to be, I believe, boots on the ground, but whatever flavor it takes, I don't know for sure, in order to subdue a nation of 92 million people. I think that there's probably true blue, dyed-in-the-wool Iranian Revolutionary Guard aligned people. There's probably 10 to 15 million of those. Sam, that's a lot of people. And you can't bomb them into the dark ages, and there's a lot of people. I mean, I use the example to Hitler. He did a blitzkrieg, a lightning war across Poland, and then he turned around and did the same thing across Europe, Western Europe. But then when he turned to Russia, it bogged down in months. And what it was a larger dedicated population, larger geographic area. Of course,
further supply line. Longer
everything.
Supply line, right?
And so when people say, and Trump touted this thing, a couple of weeks, maybe, baby. Now they're saying 4. Well, let's maybe go 6. How about maybe 8 weeks? The problem is, again, at the beginning of the first hour, we talked about how back in May of 2003, George Bush declared, that the operation was successful. We're calling it, we're packing and going home. We fought 8 more years in Iraq after that date, and before we withdrew. The fact of the matter is, this is
and how free is Iraq now? Got to ask that question. If we took 8 years and did all this stuff and everything else, and it was a necessity, how free is Iraq right now? Are they free and doing great?
It's a mixed bag too. There's a lot of places in Iraq that are pretty dangerous still, and it's really still not done. Here's the deal: we as Americans are absolutely ignorant of so many things. We want a quick solution. I think what will happen is the Americans will get a stomach full of it before this is all said and done in Iran, and we're not going to get the unconditional surrender. It was an ill-advised, improperly entered conflict at the behest of another nation, which is completely wrong from the Americans' philosophy. And so when we say, are we going to have troops on the ground? Probably, but what shape will that take? I don't know. But the fact is, it's going to be an expanding operation, more than likely. They cannot be subdued by an air war alone. And I think
that's because they're backed by China and Russia and other people that have all kinds of capacity that is being tapped, that we're not really being briefed on or told about, etc. For example, House Speaker Mike Johnson breaks with Donald Trump. He states that the United States should not engage in nation building in Iran. That's diverging from President Trump's viewpoint, because during a policy conference in Florida, he says, hey, such actions are not our responsibility due to limited resources, not to mention the lack of appetite. Trump labeled the war with Iran a tremendous success and said we're going to continue efforts in the region. The congressional votes last week didn't stop Trump, as you know, or maybe it was the week before now. But you look at that and you go, okay, well, now you've got the leader of Congress, Mike Johnson, saying we're not going to nation build. But Trump said if that unconditionally surrender would go ahead and help them build back their nation. So, again, this is where we are having a real problem with this. What's the truth? Will we nation build or won't we? I suspect we will. That's my viewpoint. I pray we don't, but I think we will. I also want to talk about attacks on the homeland because they're starting to creep up. We only see a few of them now, but what kind of tide will we see there? Because that makes it personal, right? We'll talk about it in a second. Liberty Roundtable Live.
As a parent, is receiving a faith-based, character-focused education for your children difficult to find? Do you believe that godly principles should be a central component in your child's education? Imagine a school where faith and integrity are at its center, where heritage and responsibility instill character. For over 40 years, American Heritage School has been educating both hearts and minds, bringing out academic excellence. This is the school where character and embracing the providence of a living God are fundamental, where students' national test scores average near the 90th percentile. With American Heritage School's advanced distance education program, distance is no longer an issue. With an accredited LDS-oriented curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade, your children can attend from anywhere in the world. American Heritage School will prepare your child for more than a job. It will prepare them for life. To learn more, visit american-heritage.org. That's american-heritage.org.
In the medical field, IT security is crucial. Our highly skilled consultants are HIPAA certified and have 20-plus years of experience servicing medical clinics, billing, and supply companies. We offer comprehensive endpoint protection, guarding your computers and servers against all stages of threats. And with our 24/7 monitoring services, you'll never worry about extensive downtime again. Ready to level up your IT support? Call 801-706-6980 today and discover how great IT services can be with managed IT services.
Experience the untamed spirit of the American West with Range Magazine. Each issue is a visual journey featuring award-winning photography and compelling stories that capture the heart of ranching and rural life. Stay informed on the challenges and triumphs of those who live and work on the land. Subscribe today and receive quarterly editions delivered to your doorstep, and join a community that cherishes the enduring legacy of the Western frontier. Visit rangemagazine.com to subscribe.
All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. So, I don't really know how to handle a lot of this. I don't want to just complain, but I do want to have Americans kind of stay up to what's happening in the war, right? President Trump is literally attacking these people. I mean, it's really insane what is going on. And I don't know how to handle it in the sense that, I don't want to cover war all day. To me, it's very discouraging. To me, it's frustrating. To me, it's very dividing. But at the same time, when your whole economic outlook is tied up in this thing, I mean, if the war gets really bad, the economy is going to get really bad. Well, now we're starting to see attacks on the homeland, Doctor. We saw this thing in Michigan. We saw that thing in Texas. Now there's another thing at this university. And, there's those two boys that did the bombing. All I'm telling you is we're starting to see it affect the homeland now. And my question is, have we just seen the beginning? Will that continue to increase over the next several months? And will that become a crescendo at some point in America, in the homeland? Your thoughts, Doctor?
Well, I pray not, but I fear so. And there's a lot of different flavors and approaches that could truly be done without anybody skipping a beat. I mean, we had millions of undocumented people come across the border, and they called them OTMs, other than Mexicans, and they didn't all go through the front door and fill out the paperwork and get turned loose in the United States and say, come and show that you're, when you get called, we'll have a hearing for you. No, they came across the border surreptitiously, and they might have seen them from radar or from some kind of infrared thing or something, but they came across. We don't know where they went. And
oftentimes even they came across and were given, hey, we'll set a court date to review your thing, and then hey, now they don't even know where they are, and people aren't showing up for the court dates. And so, we've got all that going on, right? And so it's just a disaster. And I think we're going to have more and more and more attacks on the homeland. I pray that we don't. I know Trump says we've got this, these terror cells locked down. We've got it handled. And I pray that he's right. I'm not talking trash about anybody. I just know that's not very fun for the American people to experience that kind of stuff in their homeland. And so I'm just telling you, if that starts to crank up, and if the economy doesn't do reasonably well, people are going to lose their appetite for this war big time fast. They're already starting to lose their appetite for it as far as I've been able to see. But Trump, though, continues. Trump says, quote, watch what happens to these deranged scumbags today. Jim Hoft over at the Gateway Pundit wrote the piece that I'm looking at. But my producer, Liz, found a soundbite of the news kind of talking about this. Let's see if we can play that, Liz. Let's hear this.
Happening overnight, President Trump is out with a new threat for Iran. Straight over to John Rogers at the alert desk with John, what the president is saying.
Oh, yeah. He put out this pointed post last night at 12:30 in the morning, making one of his most pointed threats yet. He says Iran's Navy and Air Force are gone. Their leaders have been wiped from the face of the earth. But check out this. Watch what happens to these deranged scumbags today. He also adds that these people have been killing people all over the world for 47 years, but now I am killing them. While strikes continue across the region, one of the major points of contention is the Strait of Hormuz. Yesterday, in a message, Iran's new supreme leader warned the strait will remain closed as a tool of pressure. The New York Times reports Iran is laying more mines in the strait. And with traffic at a halt, this is now the largest supply disruption in history. According to Axios, the U.S. Navy will be escorting ships through the strait, perhaps with an international coalition, but any escort will still be weeks away. In the meantime, Russia is cashing in. We are learning that the Trump administration, they're now allowing a temporary license for other countries to buy Russian oil. They do stress, though, this is a narrowly tailored measure that will not provide any significant financial benefit to Russia. However, Russian officials are now boasting.
Stop that. It won't have a benefit to Russia, huh? Okay. See, the problem that we're being told is these things. If we're winning to that degree, we've shut down their military, we've shut down their Navy. How can they lock the Straits of Hormuz so 100%? Then we say, hey, you know what? It's not going to affect anybody, but now we're reversing our stance, saying Russia can buy this oil. If all those things are true, we can't be winning like we're being told. If we were, we wouldn't need to capitulate to the Russians on oil. We wouldn't need to, wonder what we're going to do about the Strait of Hormuz or some of these kind of things. And so we're hearing these things that are so conflicting, Doctor.
You're absolutely, your correct assessment in that. And the problem, there's so many problems with this, but one is that Trump runs his mouth before he has all the facts very often, whether it's we're starting up our nuke testing program again because Russia is, when all they were doing is talking about nuclear propulsion of missiles rather than testing the nukes themselves by detonating them. When you got a little bit of information and your mouth is running constantly and you don't have a gatekeeper in your mind or somewhere, somebody ought to be, check bets, man. The fact is that it's a moving target, and to me that undermines the credibility and leads to the confusion and causes a greater amount of shall we say, opposing viewpoints.
Well, and the trust factor goes down too, to where it's like, you know what? When Trump started, I believed a lot of what he had to say, but now I'm just kind of going, okay, because I don't know that I can trust what I'm hearing. His own team contradicts him quite often now and stuff. Well, now we find out that the FBI, an FBI team conducted active shooter preparedness training at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan, just weeks before the attack just happened, Doctor. A suspect now crashed an explosive-laden truck into the synagogue and then forced entry into the building. And FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed that the FBI Detroit field office led the training earlier in the year. I look at that and I kind of go, okay, wait a minute. How often does it? occur where there's a strange training and then something bad happens. And I mean, it's we see this so often that I have to think there's a link there. I know that sounds crazy and conspiratorial, but we see it too many times. There's a training by government somewhere and then something bad goes down. And you see it so many times. Can that be a coincidence? I just don't know the facts, but I also know that you got to ask the question, right?
What are the chances? I mean, you know, that people always, there are no coincidences, people. I'm sorry. But I mean, you know, yeah, maybe a bug splattered on your windshield and that's a coincidence. But in these big monumental things that are happening, if it happened in government, it was planned. That's kind of an old adage. And so here's the, you know, coming down to it. Number one, we're in a mess that we shouldn't be in because we didn't do it constitutionally, and it would never have happened had we had. But the second thing is that the American public, I think, is jaded about things. At least half of them are. And those that are rabidly in favor of things, you know, it's just one of those things that at some point there's going to be a flipping switch point where people will say, you know what, we're not so sure we want to be in this game anymore.
Well, and Trump said, you know, he'd mock Biden and say, if I was there, we wouldn't have been in this war, and we wouldn't have been in that war, and this war and that war would have never started. But now a war has started under his leadership. And so, again, even those claims start to fall on deaf ears because we go, okay, well, maybe all those other wars wouldn't have started under you, but this one is. And so, again, that's what I mean by this duplicity. Seems to be everywhere, right? Hey, it's only bimbo eruptions that complain that the Epstein files are a problem. That was Hillary, you know, the old days, right? And now Trump's just like, hey, it's all the Democrats and everybody wants to stop my agenda. That's all that's about. No, it isn't about Trump. Well, maybe it is, because now there's been released information about that he abused a little girl and this and that. But see, we can't have any way to get to the bottom of the truth on that. We just can't. But we know Bill Clinton got caught saying he did not have sexual relations with Monica, and then he did. And now we know Trump's claiming all these things, but he's already had to pay out to one woman, and he got caught doing it. And convicted for that, or whatever you want to say. And then now we hear this girl's story. And where's the Me Too movement that says this should be heard? And I'm not here to attack President Trump, but I'm just saying, hey, are we going to do anything with these Epstein files, or are these leaks just salacious for fun? Or do they matter? You know what is the truth on this? But the problem is I don't see that anybody's really willing to investigate it. Not even Kash Patel, as far as I can tell. You bring it up, they're just like, oh, you're a Democrat operative, aren't you? You're an enemy to my agenda. You're an enemy to... No, me and Thomas Massey and others just want the truth. And if there's really crimes committed, we want accountability for those crimes, because that's what will restore trust, Doctor.
Well, as we quote often on your show, I've got a plaque that I always have in front of me. George Washington's statement, there's but one straight course, and that is to seek truth and pursue it steadily. I think with these Epstein files, I don't know if they'll go away when we start throwing nukes back and forth across the sand pile over there. But they keep looking at ways to escalate it. But let's go back to the statements that are made. I think if there's one single solitary statement that defeated George H.W. Bush for his second term, it was, read my lips, no new taxes. The people got lied to. And when he started down the tax road, they says, he's not going to get my vote this time. And you wonder where that crossover point will happen.
Well, and the equivalent now is, hey, I'm not going to get us into these wars. If it were up to me, we wouldn't be in them. If I was in charge, we wouldn't have them. And he was going to be the peace leader president. And now he's going to become the war president. I hate to say it, but I think this thing's escalating, not getting simpler. It's getting much more complicated on every level that I watch. Just my opinion, to which I'm entitled. For Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com. Get his weekly webinar, Ticket to Riot, if you will, at that website. Check out his incredible To Preserve the Nation collegiate series as well. I'm Sam Bushman, LibertyRoundTable.com. God save the Republic of the United States of America.